Hey guys, today what we're going to talk about is factoring in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. So please make sure that you are in your math encyclopedia, you're writing down these notes, and you've updated your table of contents. Previously, we had worked with polynomials factoring when we had 4 terms. We were factoring by grouping. But now we're working with 3 terms. And if you notice, the biggest thing that you have to pay attention to is that there is no coefficient out here in front of x squared. It's just x squared by itself. So we don't know how to factor yet when there's a coefficient. So we're going to try to find a pattern, and then using that pattern, we will come up with a rule. So here is our binomials, double bubbles being multiplied. We've got x plus 2 being multiplied times x plus 4. Sorry, I don't know why that's a straight line. It should be a parenthesis. So this is a double bubble. It is 2 binomials being multiplied. So we are going to go through and FOIL. So we're going to do first, outsides, insides, last. So our first, x times x is x squared. Outsides, x times 4 is 4x. Insides, 2 times x is 2x. And last, 2 times 4 is 8. When you go through and you combine your like terms, you get x squared plus 6x plus 8. So I'm hoping that you guys see a pattern here between the last 2 terms in our double bubble and the middle term and the last term in our polynomial. What you probably noticed, because you guys are brilliant students, is that we know that 2 plus 4, when we add them together, we're going to get this 6 here in the middle. And you probably also notice that 2 times 4, when I add those together, I get 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to check another example and see if that pattern actually works. So if I go over here, here is our next example. Let's write out x squared plus, I'm sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. Let's write out our double bubble, which is I have x plus 5 times the quantity of x plus 1. So let's go through and FOIL that, and I know x times x is going to be x squared. X times 1 is going to be 1x. X times 5 is going to be 5x. And 5 times 1 is going to be 5. And when I add my like terms, I get x squared plus 6x plus 5. So we were trying to check our pattern, and we were trying to see if, for sure, when we, that does not show up. When we multiply our last 2 terms, do we indeed get the last term? And when we add the last 2 terms, do we get the middle term? Well, we see that 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 1 is 6, or 5 plus 1 is 6. So yes, our pattern does work. So what we're noticing is that when I have x squared plus bx plus c, in order to factor, you want to find 2 factors of c, so 2 numbers that multiply to be c, that add to be b. So 2 numbers that multiply to be c and add to be b. Alright, let's do some examples and go the other way around from expanded form into factored form using that rule. So here's our first pretty basic example. X squared plus 7x, that's a 7, 7x plus 12. What I like to do is I create this little magic X over to the side. And I think to myself, what are two numbers that multiply to be 12? And two numbers that add to be 7? Well, it should be pretty easy in this situation since everything's positive. We know that the two numbers that add to be 7 and multiply to be 12 are 3 and 4. So we're going to have our simple double bubble. We know the first two terms have to multiply to be x squared. So those are going to be x. We have x and x. And then we have a positive 3 in the first binomial and a positive 4 in the second binomial. And this is our factored form. Pretty easy, huh? Let's try another one that might not be as simple. All right, in this one, we're going to have x squared minus 10x plus 16. So this one's a little tricky because we have this negative here. So what we're looking for are two numbers that we know are going to multiply to be 16. That's a 16. And add to be negative 10. Well, how are you going to have two numbers that add to a negative and multiply to a positive? The only way that's going to work for us is if we know that both of those numbers are negative, because negative times negative is positive. So I can't think of it off the top of my head, so I just start to work my way through the factors of 16. So negative 1 and negative 16. They will multiply to be 16, but when I add them together, I'm going to get negative 17, and I want negative 10, so I know that those cannot be my factors. So let's go and erase those. So then I'm going to go back and think, okay, if it's not 1 and 16, then let's try negative 2 and negative 8. And negative 2 times negative 8 is 16, and negative 2 times negative 8 is negative 10, so those are our factors. So now that we've found our factors, we're ready to write factored form. We have our binomial. We know the first two terms have to multiply to be this x squared, so they're x and x. And then I have a negative 2, and I have a negative 8. So this is my factored form. Pretty easy, huh? All right, let's try one more, a little bit more challenging. So we have x squared. Sorry, I gotta get it off the eraser. X squared plus 7x minus 18. So in this case, it's a little different because we're looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 18, which means I'm going to have one positive and one negative, and they're going to add to be positive 7. So that means my positive number has to be bigger. So I'm going to have a negative and I'm going to have a positive. So let's go through our factors of negative 18. What two numbers multiply to be negative 18? How about 18 and 1? Positive 18 and negative 1. Well, when I add those together, I'm going to end up with 17, which is not 7. So I know that those cannot be my factors. Okay, so we've done 1 and 18. Now let's go through the next one. How about 2 and 9? Negative 2 and positive 9. Well, negative 2 times positive 9 is negative 18. And when I add together negative 2 and positive 9, I do get 7. So those are my factors. So I found my factors, and I'm ready to write factored form. So I've got my double bubble, my two binomials, and I know my first terms have to multiply to be x squared. So I'm going to have x and x. And on my first binomial, I'm going to have negative 2. And on my second binomial, I'm going to have positive 9. And this is my factored form. These two binomials could switch. It doesn't necessarily have to be written in that order. It could be x plus 9 times x minus 2. It doesn't really matter because the commutative property, remember, tells us that it doesn't matter which order that we multiply. So that is factoring in x squared plus bx plus c form. So hopefully it made sense to you guys. You were able to get the notes down, and then tomorrow in class we will practice. So thank you so much for watching the video. Bye guys.